Good morning. We are starting this joint webinar by TERI and UNDP China. The webinar is focusing on low carbon pilots for cities and provinces, experiences from China. We have the speaker. We would like to welcome Dr. Fu Sha, who is an assistant professor at the National Center for Climate Change Strategy and International Cooperation. She's also a member of the Department for International Cooperation. Her experience relates to policy analysis focusing on energy, climate change issues in China, and her inputs to the UNFCCC climate negotiations through energy, economic, environmental system modeling and analysis. Dr. Fu Sha, very welcome to this webinar. I would also like to welcome the participants who are attending this webinar. I've been told that we have a good number of participants from academics and research interests from India as well as from China. Myself, I look after the Department of Policy Studies at TERI University, which focuses on sustainable development as an underlying theme in higher education sector. So I hand it over now to Dr. Fu Sha with a few comments that this particular theme of the webinar is highly significant for cities, not only in China, but for cities in India, particularly because this is the time when the Indian government is focusing a lot on transforming the cities in India into, let's say, smart and sustainable cities. The focus is a lot on the governance, and at the same time, we are in the process of initiating similar kind of, let's say, pilot scale initiatives. A lot of what we will hear from Dr. Fu Sha this morning. At this stage, I would also like to thank the support received from UNDP and Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation. Okay. In the meantime, and the technical we can have your brief presentation talk now for the participants.
No, I can't. No. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Professor Kumar, should we start here in China now?
Yes. I think we should go ahead with your presentation now.
Okay, thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Fu Sha. I'm from the National Center for Climate Strategy and International Cooperation under NDIC. We are a government think tank. So it's my pleasure to join this webinar and the joint hosted by TERI and the UNDP China. Today, I will give a presentation regarding the low carbon pilots for cities and provinces, and I will provide some experience from China. I will present from the following three aspects. The first one, I will have a very brief introduction to say something about the role of city in mitigation climate change. And then I will give an introduction regarding China's pilot low carbon city initiative for cities and provinces, and from the perspective of policies and progress. And finally, I will give some information regarding China's pilot low carbon carbon emission trading system in the regional level, and which means that we have the pilot ETS system in the regional level, and I will present China's policies and progress. First, let me talking about the role of city in mitigating climate change. I think everyone may have known the important role of city in mitigation GHG emissions. The latest published IPCC AI5 Working Group 3 report is the first time an entire chapter talking about the issue of the urban issues and about the human settlement. And according to these chapters, and we can find out that AI5 Working Group 3 would like to tell us First, I would like to say something about the important role of city in mitigation GHG emissions. And as I mentioned previously, and according to the latest published IPCC AI5 Working Group 3 report, it is the first time that the IPCC has used the entire chapter to discuss the issues regarding the cities, regarding the human settlements and infrastructure. And the IPCC Chapter 12 of the Working Group 3 report has provided very important conclusions regarding the urbans. And according to the conclusions, we can find out that the urban areas account for more than half of the global primary energy use and energy-related CO2 emissions. So the role of urban areas is very important. And then the urban areas is not isolated and is not only related to the human consumption, the well-being consumption. However, it is related to the infrastructure. The infrastructure and urban form are strongly interlinked, and the locking patterns of land use, transport choices, housing, and the behavior will affect the emission of CO2 emissions in the area of urban. And the second one is the last conclusion is that the largest opportunities for future urban GHG emission reduction will be occurred in the rapidly urbanization countries, where the urban form and infrastructure are not locked in. So which means that in the coming decades, the largest opportunities might occur in the rapid urbanization countries, which means the countries like China, India, and other emerging economies. And however, these countries are often limited governance, technical, financial, and institutional capacities. So how to promote these countries to transform to a low-carbon urbanization way is very important for these countries. And other literatures also highlight the importance of cities in mitigation GHG emissions. As I mentioned here, as the centers of population, industry, transport, and infrastructure, cities have a profound impact on the global carbon emissions. And the cities and urban areas are estimated to use 75% of the world energy and produce up to 80% of its greenhouse gas emissions, which you can see that maybe the data here is not very consistent with each other, but it is because of the definition of the cities and the calculation method it adopted. But anyway, the important role of cities in mitigation GHG exercise is confirmed by a lot of literatures and as well as by the IPCC reports. So here I would like to present a figure regarding the urbanization rate together with the economic growth. The y-axis here is the urbanization rate of different countries, and the x-axis is regarding the GDP per capita. Here we selected the major economies here, and we will find out that for the most of the developed countries, they have already finalized their urbanization process. So which means they always have a very high urbanization rate, but they have two categories. Maybe we can clarify to two categories. And the first one is like countries like UK, like Australia, and like US, they have a relatively higher urbanization rate, and the rate is more than 80% sometimes. And for countries like Japan, and for countries like France and like Germany, and their urbanization rate are relatively low, lower than that one of UK, and were between 70% to 80%. And for countries like emerging economies, and here we have two types as well. The first one is countries located in Latin America. For these countries like Brazil, and also countries like Mexico, and even their per capita emissions now is not so higher compared with that of developed countries. However, we can find out that their urbanization rate is now already very higher. And for countries like China and India, and you will find out that both their GDP per capita and urbanization rate are now relatively low. And then, which means that they are now experiencing a rapid growth period free of urbanization. And the general speaking, that we can find out that the urbanization always accompanies economic growth, but with different patterns sometimes. And if we refer the urbanization process in China, and as I mentioned before, China is now under rapid urbanization, and this kind of trend will continue in the coming decade. For year 1990, we will find out that the urbanizing rate only 26%, and for the year 2000, and the urbanizing rate has been increased to 36%, and for present or for the recent year, which means the 2012, the urbanization rate is now higher than 50%. And from the most of literatures, and we will find out that almost all the literatures, and they project that China's urbanization rate will continue to increase, and by the year 2050, the rate is more likely to more than 75%. So, which means that there still will be a lot of people will be migrate from the rural region to the urban region in the coming decade. And since the urbanization generally will increase emissions, and China will face enormous pressure to reduce emissions while the economic development and the urbanization move forward. Why? I think it is not difficult to understand, because usually the people living in the urban areas, they will have a relatively higher income levels, and their demand for the living standards and for the consumptions and will increase relatively, and then not only for the direct consumption needs, but also for the demand for the infrastructure, and will increase and the construction of infrastructure will then result in a larger demand for the energy-intensive products like cement, like iron and steel, and all this will finally result in the higher emission level. And then we can find out that the development of low-carbon cities is crucial to mitigating the growth of carbon emissions in China. How to have a low-carbon urbanization, and here I present a figure which would like to establish the relationship between the urbanization, the urbanization ratio, and together with emission levels. And when the urbanization proceeded. And however, if we refer to the existing experience of developed countries, and we will find out that yes, they have two patterns. And the first one is countries like US and like Australia, and maybe their urbanization were accompanied by a relatively higher emission level. However, for countries like Japan, like EU countries, and also as well like the Latin American countries like Brazil, so their urbanization sometimes is not definitely accompanying with a higher level of emission. So which model we should choose for China to proceed its urbanization is very crucial for China's future emission level. In recognizing the importance of China to proceed is to have a low carbon urbanization pattern and to develop low carbon cities. So China has now initiated its pilot low carbon city initiative for cities and provinces. And then I will give an introduction regarding China's pilot low carbon city initiative for cities and provinces. In July 2010, NDIC, the top agencies that have take charge of the formulating and implementing national economic and social development strategies, has initiated a low carbon pilot province and city program. And the first branch has included 5 provinces and 8 cities. The 5 provinces here is Yunnan provinces, which located in the southwest part of China, and the Guangdong provinces, which located in the southeast part of China, and the Hubei provinces, which in the middle part of China, and as well as the Shanxi provinces, and also as the middle part of China, and also as well as the Liaoning provinces, and have the northeast part of China. And the first branch pilots also have 8 cities, and we have the Tianjin provinces, which is very close to the capital of China, Beijing, and the Baoding provinces, and also close to the Beijing, and and also have the Hangzhou provinces, and here is in the east part of China, and then have the Chongqing city, and the Nanchang city, Guiyang city, Xiamen city, and Shenzhen city. I will not indicate these cities one by one. And also we have, after the implementation of this first branch, and in the November of 2012, another 29 provinces and cities, such as Beijing, Shanghai, have been nominated as the second batch of low carbon pilots. So in total, China have 42 provinces and cities have been selected as low carbon pilots. All these pilot cities, as you can see from the distribution of these cities and provinces, and will be easily to find out that they are located in different areas of China, and the total will occupy about 57 of China's GDP, 42 of China's population, and as well as 56 of China's energy-related CO2 emissions. So it will represent the most of the situation in China. If we further refer to the socio-economic indicators of these pilot cities here, because we have so many pilots and we have 42 pilots, so in order to easily to do the comparison, so here we only selected the 8 cities, which means 8 cities, the first page of pilot. And even only looking at these 8 cities, we can find out the divergence of these cities in terms of population size, in terms of urbanization rate, in terms of the economic development, and as well as the industrial structure. So you can easily find out from the following figures, and then the urbanization rate of these 8 cities ranged from 38.9% of Baoding city and to about 100% of Shenzhen. And also the per capita GDP of Shenzhen is almost about 5 times that of Baoding. So additionally, you can find out that the size of each city's population varies vastly among the 8 cities. The population of the provincial level city like Chongqing is approximately 8 times that of Xiamen. And agriculture contributes to only about 0.1 of Shenzhen's GDP. However, for a city like Chongqing, the primary sector contributes to more than 30% of GDP. And also, if we compare with the share of the tertiary sector, which means the share of service sector, and we will find out that for Guiyang, for cities like Guiyang, Xiamen, Hangzhou, and Tianjin, this share is close, and as well as Shenzhen, the share is close to 50%. However, for cities like Baoding and Chongqing and Nanchang, the share is relatively lower. So, and also if we refer, so the differences also exist when we compared with the share of second sector and also as well as the per capita GDP. So we can find out that the divergence in socioeconomic indicators underscore the city's differing stage of urbanization and hint at possible differences in priorities and in the forces and the strategies for pursuing a low carbon pathway for development. So if we compare the cities in China to a broader range, and which means that if we compare the cities in China with the representative cities worldwide, and here we selected cities from Japan and from Europe and from Brazil and from India, from Australia, and as well as from UK and the US. So here we selected several cities, and you can find out that and here China, we only selected cities like Shanghai, Tianjin, Qingdao, Beijing, Chongqing, and for cities like Chongqing, as I mentioned before, and it's still in an earlier stage of industrialization and urbanization, and its emissions are relatively low. And for cities like Beijing, Tianjin, and Shanghai, their emissions are relatively higher and are still higher than cities like Tokyo, and but still lower than cities like Washington, like Sydney, and like Portland. So this will help us to position the situation of China cities. But here I still want to point out several differences between which we should notice when we conducting such kind of comparison. The most important and the most important one is that usually the they have different definition about cities of China and of foreigner cities. For cities like China, and we always use the boundary of administrative boundary. So which means that the cities in China concluding a lot of industries and a lot of manufacturing but for cities abroad, like cities in city, like Washington DC, and their emissions are mainly from the buildings and from the transportation. So that is the difference. That is the major differences between the cities of China cities and the cities abroad. So after the pilot cities and the provinces have been selected, and they are requested to do the following 5 actions. The first one is they are requested to develop and propose a low carbon development plan. So the plan will cover the year till the time period till the year 2020. And it will concluding the adjustment of the industry structure, the optimization of energy structures, and the improving of energy saving, and also as well as the increasing of carbon sink. And secondly, they were asked to formulate supportive policies for low carbon green goals. And thirdly, they are asked to establish a low carbon industrial system. So which means that to encouraging the development of low carbon industries, like the development of wind industry, the solar industry. And the first one is about to establish a greenhouse gas emission statistics and data management system, and which is very important for cities, especially in China, because of their very weakness capacity in the statistics and MRV systems. And the last one is about to encouraging a low carbon lifestyle and consumption patterns. In order to achieving the above 5 tasks identified by the national governance and about the state governance and about by the NDRC. So till now, about almost all the pilots have finished their low carbon plans, and they have identified the targets of these cities for the pilots. And here for the figures listed right hand, and you will find out here I indicated the target for the 8 cities which have been included in the first batches of low carbon pilots. And almost all these cities have selected carbon intensity target and some as their primary target, and some cities like Tianjin and also have selected or have choose the energy intensity, and for cities like Xiamen, and they do not have carbon intensity target, but they have energy intensity target as well as total amount carbon emission cap. And for the first 5 pilot provinces and 8 pilot cities, and as I mentioned, the intensity target is their priority, but we have one exemption, which is Shenzhen. Shenzhen city is the first to propose to arrive at emission peak between the 2015 and 2020. And for the second batch of the 29 low carbon pilot provinces and cities, actually they are more ambitious, and they have announced to curb the total amount of carbon emissions all the peak year for carbon emissions. Here I listed the emission peak they pronounced it for these pilot cities and provinces. And for about half of the countries, they have pronounced to achieve their kept their emission peak before the year or by the year 2020. And for about less than 1/3 of these countries, and they have proposed to achieve their emission peak around the year 2025. And for 7 cities, and their emission peak will be achieved by the year 2030, and which is similar to China's national target regarding the emission peak has been announced in the China-US joint announcement last year. So we can find out that the majority of the pilot provinces and cities, and they are more ambitious than the national level target. And they will pick a relatively earlier or much earlier than the national target, which we can achieve. So besides the overall target I mentioned, like the carbon intensity target, carbon emission target, and the energy intensity target, or energy saving target, or the share of non-fossil fuels, we also have sectoral level target, which means that we have industrial level target, we have the building targets, and we have the transport targets, ecological targets, and as well as other targets like the R&D investment or the information and dissemination. And here I also use the 8 cities as example, and here you will find out that the different cities, they will choose different target in their national low carbon in their low carbon plans. Supporting measures are also very important for the pilots to proceed their low carbon plans and to implementing their low carbon plans. So by examining the supporting measures put forward by the low carbon city pilots, we will find out that for China, the local governments are now still relying more on the administrative planning and legal measures rather than the market-based measures to implement their low carbon city plans. And the financial and tax measures aimed at promoting the implementation of low carbon programs are generally ambitious and lack program diversity. And the establishment of market mechanisms in supporting the low carbon development in these cities are still newer and still in the early. Okay, let's continue. And the scientific research and the international cooperation, information, and dissemination are other very important aspects of supporting measures has been selected by these countries. Okay, so for the latest progress and the performance evaluation, and we can find out that all the pilot provinces and cities have done a lot and have denoted great efforts to the tertiary industry and restricted the sectors that either high energy consumption, heavy pollution, and resource dependency. They have made positive progress in developing strategic emerging industries, promoting clean energy, increasing forest sinks, advocating a green and low carbon lifestyle and consumption model, and improving and innovating systems and mechanisms, and actually exploring green and low carbon development nodes that fit their local conditions. And according to the performance evaluation conducted by the year 2013, and we can find out that the carbon intensity in the 10 pilot provinces and cities here is referred to the 6 provinces and 4 cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Tianjin, and Chongqing, because we only have the evaluation at the province level. And for the 10 pilot provinces and cities, their carbon intensity has dropped by nearly 90.2% in the year 2012 compared with the year 2010, higher than the decline on the national level. And in addition, the Guangdong, Hubei, Beijing, Tianjin, Shanghai, and Yunnan provinces had surpassed their target in 2012 and the cumulative amount prescribed in the 12th five-year plan. Other pilot regions and also have performed better in reducing carbon intensity than the regions without similar conditions. So which means that the low carbon pilots in China are now works well and performed well. But we still, according to the experience or practice regarding the low carbon pilots in the national and provincial level in China, we can find out that the low carbon development strategy and planning needs to exceed the traditional category of energy conservation and emission reduction planning, which means that it should be a comprehensive planning and it should have integrate the low carbon development planning into the overall urban development strategy in accordance with the local conditions and to boost the leapfrogging social scientific development of provinces and cities. So it should be at a much higher level than the traditional energy conservation and emission reduction planning. And in addition, it is very important, it is essential to provide a simplified and practical decision-making supporting tools to maintain the current accounting and measurement system and the availability of data information with the following features. It should be an integrative one and considering not only the energy and technology, but also the population, the economic scale, and the structure. And also it should be able to dealing with the problem of carbon accounting at city level. As I mentioned before, the carbon accounting and the GHG inventory issue is a big challenger for China at city level because most cities, they do not have the capacity to develop their own GHG inventory, and the data is not available for many variables or for many data sources. And also the tool should be action-oriented and it will be easy to adopt it from the theory to action. And then the final it should be user-friendly. And I know that many institutions now in China pay more attention to develop such kind of supporting tools to help the local governments, and it is now in good process. Finally, I will do an introduction regarding China's pilot carbon emission trading system in cities and provinces. Why I'm talking about the carbon emission trading system of the regional ETS pilots? Because you can find out that all the 7 pilots, the regional ETS pilots, these provinces and cities, they also the pilots for the low carbon cities and provinces. For provinces like Guangdong and Hubei, and also cities like Tianjin, Chongqing, and Shenzhen, they are listed in the first 8 cities and 5 provinces, low carbon pilots. And for cities like Beijing and Shanghai, they have been selected in the second batch of low carbon cities and provinces. So they have close linkage with the pilot cities and provinces. And for these 7 provinces, which have 2 provinces and 5 cities, they have been selected also by the NDRC as the regional ETS pilots in the year 2011. And together, the 7 pilot cities cover a population of over 260 million people and almost $1.8 trillion in GDP in the year 2010. So if we refer to the social economic indicator of these pilots as well, And we can find out that, yes, the pilot things cover also a wide range of different economic circumstances. And from Hubei is a relatively less developed region with an economic structure dominated by the heavy industry, and to the high-income coastal cities like Shanghai, Beijing, and Shenzhen, whose economics are dominated by the service and some manufacturing. So the average levels of income, energy use, and emissions differ greatly, and which means that this will determine the way they design their ETS system. If we refer to the coverage of the pilot ETS scheme, we will find out that the ETS coverage ranges from 33% of emissions in Hubei to 60% in Tianjin. So the coverage of emissions are differ among the different pilots. And the covered emissions under all the pilot amount to about 7% of China's total emissions. The total number of covered installations varies in each of the pilots from the 107 in Hubei to 830 in Guangdong. Why? Because of the emission threshold for coverage, as I listed here, is different for different cities. For some cities, the threshold is relatively higher. For example, like 20,000. And for some cities like Shenzhen, and the threshold is much lower. So this will finally determine the number of covered entities. And for example, for the provinces like Guangdong and cities like Shenzhen, the covered number of entities are relatively higher than that of other cities. So here I also listed the coverage of EU ETS phase 1 for reference, and we can find out that the total coverage CO2 emissions for the 7 pilots is about 1/3 of that, is less than 1/3 of that EU coverage. So that will help us to positioning the China's pilots. Here I will further I will talking about several important issues regarding the design of the system. The first one is about the cap setting. The cap setting is of great importance for the pilot of ETS things. But the different cities, different pilots here, they choose different methods to do the cap setting. For example, for Shanghai, the allocation of the key industries are calculated according to emission benchmarks. However, for Shenzhen, they have adopted a more complex model of an intensity-based cap determination method. So for Hubei thing, they have adopted a hybrid thing, which means that based on the project goals as well as the possibility of adjustment to the cap. And permit allocation is another great important issue for the ETS system. And here we can find out that for all the China's pilots, the initial allocation of emission permits are free allocated, which means that except for a very limited number of auctions in Shenzhen and about in Guangdong and in Shenzhen, and almost all the permits are now free allocated based on the historical emissions, but they already reserved several caps for the allowances for new entrants, because most of China's cities are now still enterprising the increase of emissions. So the reservation for the new entries are still very important for China's ETS pilots. Here, so finally, I will see some up-to-date progress. And by the end of 2013, 5 pilots have, like Shenzhen, Shanghai, Beijing, Guangdong, and Tianjin, had launched carbon emission trading markets. And in the second quarter of last year, Hubei provinces and Chongqing followed in their steps. And all these pilot provinces and cities have done a lot of work. I will not explain details here. And by the end of October 2014, which means the last year, the total trading volume of carbon dioxide in the carbon emission trading markets of 7 pilot provinces and cities reached 13.75 million tons of CO2, and the turnover was more than 500 million yuan. A total number of 15.21 million tons of CO2 of carbon quota have been sold at auction for 760 million yuan. So I have finished my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, Professor Fu, that was a very interesting presentation. Thank you very much for a very elaborate explanation of how things have been planned and have been progressing on low carbon pilot cities and provinces in China. We have received some interesting questions. Partly, some of these questions have been partly already addressed through some of your slides, but we may, for the interest of our participants, we will look at these questions once again and relate to these questions. Just pull up. That's an interesting question. The first one itself actually relates to, there are 2 questions relating to your slide number on urbanization accompanying economic growth. And the question by Niti Joshi relates to how do we define urbanization, which is reflected on the y-axis on this graph. So we can take questions one by one. Is that fine?
Yes, but it's that your voice is not so clear for me.
So the question is urbanization and economic growth and how.
Okay. Here the urbanization here is we calculate it in a very simple way and just use the share of the urban population and divided by the total population. This is the way we calculate the urbanization ratio.
That's a straightforward clarification to that question particularly. There's another question that we have again relating to the same graph, that why increased GDP is showing a plateau in urbanization. After a certain GDP, urbanization is becoming stagnant. That gets reflected by particularly through some, I think most of the countries are reflecting that kind of graph through this particular slide, same slide.
Yes.
Any response to this particular question?
Yes, I can explain. So generally, if we refer to the history of urbanization, and we will find out usually all the countries will experience 3 stages. The first one, the urbanization growth rate is relatively lower than the growth rate of GDP, and which means that we have a slow urbanization stage. And then we will have a speed up urbanization stage like China now is experiencing, and which means that the economic growth will accompanied by a very rapid urbanization. And finally, when the economic growth has been achieved a certain level, and then which means like the one we presented for the countries, for all the developed countries, and which means that the urbanization has been a very stable level, and there their urbanization rate will not increase a lot, and but the economic growth will still continue. So generally, it is the experience about the urbanization.
Yes, thank you very much for that response. It is also that from your response to the first question, clarifying on how we calculate urbanization rate in China also relates to this particular question, and explaining why the graph actually plateaus after a certain amount of GDP per capita, which is on the y-axis.
I would like to add one explanation because of the time schedule of the data we have. So we do not have very long history data about the developed countries. So that's why their rapid urbanization stage cannot be presented in the figure.
Okay, thank you. Let's take another one, which is the question from Jason Lee on what sort of market mechanisms are in the trial stage. I would quickly learn that it is already has been referred to one of your last slides on up-to-date in progress, but maybe you would like to add to and respond to this question as well.
Okay. For market-based instrument, usually we're talking about the ETS and the carbon tax. And for China now, we choose to adopt the policy regarding the ETS, and we have already initiated pilots for the regional ETS things, and as I mentioned in the third part of my presentation. And national level, we proposed to have a nationwide carbon market before the year 2020.
Thank you. That's particularly of interest to a lot of us here at TERI as well to know more about the current and future scenario of this emission trading markets in China. How does that progress in future? I think we will continue to get in touch with you more on that as well. I would go to another question by Suraj Garg. And this is again more relating to overall approach that NDRC has looked at in terms of selecting the cities. What has been the criteria in selecting those 8 cities? And maybe I can add here even to the 5 provinces that were selected initially in the first stage.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a question, and a lot of indicators I think has been considered, or a lot of factors has been considered by selecting such kind of cities and provinces, and about the different level of development and the different location of different geographical location, and the different characteristics of emission growth pattern, and also different endorsement of energy. And another one most important issue is that the intention of the local governments, and sometimes especially for the first 5 provinces and 80 cities, and I think the intention or the willingness of the local governance and the local stakeholder, local policymakers has contributed a lot to their selection, to contribute to that the selection of the low carbon provinces and the cities, and it will help them to be selected.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe I'll pick up now 2 more questions by Suraj Garg again on carbon emissions trading market. I think you have already responded to that question in terms of carbon emissions trading market in China. The second question, which is from Helen, on why it seems separated from the global market. I think that I'm interpreting here that it relates to the carbon emissions trading market. If it is separated from the global market, or does it connect, and in what way?
Yes, the existing carbon market in China is isolated from the global carbon market because the intention to have such kind of low carbon pilot, as for such kind of ETS pilots in China, and as well as the incoming national low carbon market, is in order to help China to achieve its own national domestic targets regarding the low carbon intensity, or about the carbon intensity and the non-fossil fuel share. So the intention for the establishment of the ETS is to assist or to help China to achieve its domestic target instead of the global one. So that is why now the China's carbon market is isolated from the global one. But if now we are under the negotiation to establish the post-2020 international climate regime, and all the countries are now preparing to put forward targets after 2020. So once the global target is determined and the global level carbon market is established, I think maybe the linkage from the China's market to global market can be anticipated. But now it is still isolated.
Okay, thank you very much for that response. There is one more question which is also related to that, a bit more specific, from Helen as well. How can China ETS scheme join the EU ETS or global ETS scheme, and when? I think again it relates back to your response to the previous two questions as well, but maybe if there is anything to add to this particular question.
Yes, now it is very hard to tell that when and how to connect to EU ETS, because we know the thing, because we still do not have the nationwide carbon market in China yet. But yes, from the research perspective, we are now studying or conducting some kind of research regarding this topic. But I hope maybe in the near future we can have more certain answers.
Okay, thank you very much. I think, though as a moderator, I would add some questions from our side as well. I'm particularly interested for us to know how the local governance in these cities as well as provinces responded to the NCRC's overall plan, and also to know actually particularly the industrial sector, because one of the tasks that these 8 cities are looking at is through let's say low carbon emissions, the industry. How has the industry responded to this overall approach?
Okay, the local government, and they play a very key role in developing the low carbon plans in the local level, and the major government they take charge of such kind of plan is the one, I think, like the national level, the one from the DRC of the local government. They always take charge of the design of such and the implementation of such kind of low carbon plans and policies. And for the involvement of industries, I think they have very close linkage. They have close relationship with the local policymakers, and when local policymakers they design their policies, their plans, and their incentives, and they will have a consultation with the industries, and the industries, all the stakeholders like the industries, the public, and the experts, they were being involved in such kind of policy making. So first, they will be involved in the development of policies and in the process of policy decision makings. And secondly, they will be the major presenter or major actors in the implementation of such kind of policies and plans.
Okay, Dr. Fu, that was very interesting, your responses to the questions. Before we close the session, I would also ask you if you have any questions or any comments to add at this stage, responding to either the questions or to us.
I think no. Yes, I think no. I have no questions.
Okay, wonderful. So at this, I think I would once again say that your presentation has set a very interesting overview of what is happening in terms of low carbon development and growth at the national and regional level, coming down to the city level in China. I think there is a lot that one can look at in terms of the framework that China has adopted, and which relates very well in terms of the timings of how urban development is being planned and promoted in India. So there is some degree of learning that cities in India do have to pick up from cities and framework in China and other countries as well. Interestingly, one of the media reported today in the press media itself was on how cities such as Delhi has to look at the efforts done by Beijing in terms of reducing its pollution emissions particularly from transport sector. So that kind of synergy already exists. I think we will take it forward in terms of learning from this particular session. And I would also like to actually acknowledge the participants on their questions, which has given us time to respond and bring more clarity, more additions to the presentation that you have made. I would also like to now once again thank the support received from UNDP and Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation for hosting this and helping us in terms of Terry to host this webinar. And I would like to mention too about the participants that we would be making this particular presentation and the edited version of the video available for all the participants who have participated in this webinar very soon. So thank you very much to all the participants and Dr. Fu. Thank you.
Thank you.